All right, welcome back, friends. We are Sports Take, JAKIB Sports YouTube Network. Derek Gunn, Rob Ellis hanging out with you on this Wednesday. Just wrap things up with Jeff Mosher and Scott Lauber. If you missed any of that interview and you want to go back and check it out, just go to JAKIBSports.com or JAKIB Sports YouTube channel. You can check out everything that we do on there. All right, let's talk some Sixers, Derek. We talked about it yesterday. We mentioned it. And we kind of got into it a little bit, but let's dig a little deeper. Doc Rivers was on the Bill Simmons podcast that dropped, I believe, yesterday. And, had a lot to say. I'll give him credit. He answered the questions. He didn't duck them. Some would say, part of that is Doc maybe not necessarily taking full accountability, whatever. That's a discussion for another time. He isn't here anymore, and it really doesn't matter. But let's dig into a couple things that he had to say. Let's start with Joel Embiid. One of the things he made a point to talk about, Derek, was the fact that he needs to be a better teammate. And it isn't just about on the court. It's about leading, which is an interesting thing. Everybody's personality is different. Everybody sort of ticks a little bit differently. I don't know if some of this isn't the fact that Joel didn't grow up playing the game, didn't grow up, in American culture. I don't know that's a viable explanation for it, but it's something the organization, at least it seems like with Doc Rivers, tried to emphasize with him. Can you become that guy at this point, or is he who he is in your estimation?
He can, because the franchise, as we know it today, still revolves around him. Everything that they're trying to build is around him. Let's face it, there are some guys who are just not leaders. And that's not a knock against them. There are some guys who are more introverts than extroverts. And you ask them to extend themselves and to be something that they're not normally accustomed to being, and it's a little bit harder. Mm-hmm. But considering what he has done so far in his career, he's established himself as one of the best players in the game. He has established himself as the best big man as we know it today. Let's face it, the big man as we know it today is far from what we grew up watching. But he has established himself as the best big man in the game. He has finally gotten the monkey off his back in terms of being omitted from the All-Star from the MVP category. He's finally got that MVP trophy. So he should be comfortable in himself at this stage of his life, even if he didn't grow up playing basketball, even if he's always been a quiet guy. He seems to be more animated when he's on social media than he does when he's talking after a game or after a practice. You can learn certain traits and extend yourself. We all have inner traits that we never tap into. It could be little things, leadership things, being able to perform, being able to write, being able to do things we never thought we could, because we've always said in our mind, I can't do that. And we've accepted that. But if you push yourself, you can find that you can do certain things that you're not comfortable doing. I think at this stage, Joel is smart enough to realize that he is the face of this organization still. As mediocre as it is right now, and I'm saying mediocre about a team that still got to the playoffs, got to the second round 3 consecutive years. He is still the face of that franchise. So I think the onus is on him now to extend himself a little bit more, and to come out of his comfort zone, and to embrace his teammates a little bit more, get to know them a little bit better. And I don't know if he does, but I'm saying this is all based on what Doc is saying. Get to know your teammates a little bit more. You don't have to be out with them every night. You don't need to be in the club with them. If you're a homebody, understand that. And invite the guys over to play video games one night, play cards. Just come over, sit around and talk basketball, talk about life, in general. There's a lot of little things that fall under the umbrella of leadership that he can incorporate maybe a little bit better. And I think if he does that, I think that builds more of a cohesive unit, more of a bond between the guys on the court and off the court.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think, too, if last year and yet another second-round failure doesn't wake you up and doesn't in some way force you to do something different, then, it's a lost cause. Like, I'm hoping he doesn't look at it and say, I won the MVP. I was out there dragging around one leg. What do you want me to do? I hope he doesn't view it that way, because he does have to get better. You can always get better in differing ways, and he's got to get better at what he does. The other thing that I thought was very interesting, Derek, and I think this applies to him, that Doc Rivers said was, I think the term he used was the organization is very media alert. And he wasn't saying it in a complimentary way, like, a PR person will get a coach or a player ready and say, hey, they're going to ask you about the play in the third quarter where you blah, blah, blah. That's what a good PR guy does. I think the Sixers and the organization in general care too much about what's said on social media, what the outside noise is. And I get it. It can get old sometimes, catching so much heat that these guys get, but that's part of the gig now in 2023.
Yeah.
That's something else I think he needs to grow up with and move on from, and not be so concerned about what people are saying rather than just what's happening with his team.
I mean, there was one point, I don't think it was this past season, I'm not sure, where he actually retweeted a comment that was on one of the local sports talk radio stations. Why? Did it bother you that much you needed to repeat it and respond to it?
Yeah.
There are players that say, what you can say about me what you want. Number one, I'm still getting paid. I'm still playing the game. It's water off a duck's back. It seems to me that he takes a lot of things too personal, and I think it affects his overall demeanor on the court, off the court. He's not shy about responding to things on social media.
Mm-hmm.
Why? And why hasn't anybody, Doc Rivers or anybody else in the organization, been able to get that point across to him and to get him to get away from that? I don't understand why. Can Nick Nurse do it and his coaching staff? That remains to be seen. Is that a part of Nick Nurse's, guidelines of success, is to stay off of social media? Don't let these things get to you. There's 100,000 lounge chair coaches out there and GMs out there that think they don't know more than you do, and what we know in this organization. Duck wins says, D-Gun, why are you bringing me in this debate? Duck, shame on you if it was you. Yeah. But let's face it, Rob, in all sports, there are athletes, and we see football players jaw-jacking on Twitter every day, with fans, fellow players, so on and so. Why? What do you gain by that?
I don't know. It's a no-win. That's the thing. There's an old adage, and I'm not saying everybody on social media is this, but the people who really want to come at you and troll you, you can't argue with an idiot, because you're never going to win. You're not going to win. So I don't know if teams need to do a better job sort of educating these guys, counseling these guys, talking to these guys about it, or guys just need to be stronger willed, just to ignore it. But I think that's definitely something, man. And Joel is a chief culprit of it, where I think he listens to the noise a little bit too much sometimes.
Yeah, but see, Rob, what you just said, teams doing a better job of talking to and teaching these players the do's and don'ts, the highs and lows of you as a professional athlete. I think it comes down to today's generation. See, they grew up with all this social media stuff. Former players did not. They didn't have that. They could take it. Most of them can take it or leave it.
Right.
Today's athlete, let's face it, they're still everyday people in a lot of ways. They're put on a pedestal because of what they do and how much money they make, but they're still regular guys in the sense that social media has been such an integral part of their lives, whereas we live by the newspaper back in the day. Now everything you want is right in the palm of your hand, on the phone, laptop, iPad. You got to keep up with what's going on in the world. All of a sudden you see something about yourself and you have to retaliate. NFL players in particular, when rookies come to the league, every team has these symposiums for players. Mm-hmm. Stay away from this. Don't do this. Don't gamble. Don't get caught up with your boys in a bad situation. It happens all the time.
Right.
And same thing with basketball players. Look at Ja Morant.
Yep.
It happens all the time. You can't get through to a lot of these players of today's generation, man. Once they get fame, you can hardly tell them anything. That's why so many former players that I talk to in the NFL say, man, I'm not coaching today's player. Man, you can't coach these kids nowadays. You got to babysit. See, the guys that I'm talking to are guys that came up in our era. You were told to do something and you respond and you set your butt down until you stop pouting and you did it.
Yeah.
These guys now shut down their pout. They retaliate through social media. You know, you got to have individual psychologists to talk to a group of guys you shouldn't have to.
Yeah.
But that's the world we live in with professional athletes today.
Chris D brings up an interesting point,
Yeah.
Saying basically try to nurse Joel's leadership skills and social media content. Maybe Joel should spend some time with Jalen Hurts. I'd love for a lot of these guys to spend time with Jalen Hurts, man. I really do. I would love for that to be the case because my man is focused on all the right things. But
Jalen Hurts is a rarity. And like I said, he's an old man mentality in a young man's body.
Yeah.
There are not many 24-year-old Jalen Hurts out there. I think Joel needs to spend some time with Aaron Rodgers in darkness out in Oregon or Washington or where it is and get away from society altogether and just rethink about life. Put him in a dark cave with Aaron Rodgers or next to Aaron Rodgers for a week.
Oh, God. Well, let me read you what Tone just said. Tone, our producer. He said that if I'm being honest with myself, it's easy for us to say what they should do in certain situations. If you see a lie about you on social media, the urge to clear the air is so gripping. I get it sometimes. I get it sometimes too, Tone, but here's the problem. Let's just take Twitter, but it really applies to any social media. It's the wild, wild west. There's no regulations. There's no sourcing.
Nope.
There's no anything. So anybody can say anything and at you. Is it really worth your time and consternation and effort to reply to stupidity? Granted, it's not easy, but you do have to have some kind of discipline with it, or else when people see it gets to you, you're going to have just trolls piling on, and it becomes a whole thing. But I hear you. All right, let's hit a couple other things that
let me say this, Rob. I think the biggest problem is you get the trolls. All they want you to do is respond so they can say you got you to respond.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden wolves come out of the woodwork and they jump in on it to get you and players fall for this bait every time. And I don't understand why, because you make the situation worse instead of better. Because then you start dropping F-bombs and start cursing back and forth. All of a sudden you become a national story for the wrong reason because you got sucked into this stuff.
Yeah. You know what it's like? It's very similar to like if one of these guys and this is extremely unfortunate, but if one of these guys is out and some dude just has nothing to lose, wants to start a fight with them.
Yep.
If you acquiesce and you get into it with this guy, you either end up beating his ass and having to pay him,
yep,
or you get arrested, or your name makes the headlines, and Joe Schmo, nothing happens to Joe Schmo, or if something happens, nobody cares about Joe Schmo. They care about you. It's along the same lines. I know it's not the same exact thing, but it's.
And then even if you were in the right, you are the one, because you are not just an athlete. You are a businessman working for a high-profile corporation. You have to go on social media and extend apologies. I apologize to my family, to the organization for embarrassing them. How many times have we seen, that's not my true character? I stepped out of line, yada, yada. Well, if you were in control of the situation, you wouldn't have to do any of these things. If you were smart enough not to get duped by these people who are just trying to suck you in and get a couple clicks, you wouldn't have to worry about this situation. See, that's what I said a little while ago. The old school players, they can take or leave social media. To them, it's just, a lot of it is a joke. To a lot of older players I talk to, it's a joke. It's an avenue to get if you're an ex-player and you're trying to start a second career, it's a great avenue in terms of getting your name out there and getting people to notice your product, whether it's a podcast, a line of clothing, shoes, whatever the case may be. But they also know, I'm not going to let these people suck me in like this. I got better things to do. Today's athlete doesn't see it that way, unfortunately. Maybe won't see it until they're done playing.
Maybe. And I'll give you another example. And this is more of an extreme for sure. But if you look at John Morant's situation, and here's the parallel I'm drawing. John Morant lost like $39 million because of his own actions.
Yep.
There wasn't any consequences for his buddies who were in the car with him or who were in these videos with him, because those guys don't have as much to lose as him. So again, is it fair? No, it's not fair, but life's not fair a lot of times. So you got to carry yourself a little bit differently, unfortunately.
Think about what you just said. Not 39,000, not 390,000. He lost $39 million and he's 24 years old. How many 24-year-olds can even utter the words $39 million capability in my life?
Yeah. Yeah.
And
There's just a lot more to lose. Yeah. There's just a lot more to lose.
You'll never see that money
guys.
back.
Yeah. All right. A couple other things that Doc had to say. Talk about James Harden. Like, this is where, if I hear this and I'm Daryl Morey and I'm on the organization, I'm saying to myself, do we really want to bring this back? Like, it sounds like Doc tried to convince Harden this year that, hey, you need to be a distributor more, as opposed to just, controlling the ball as much as you controlled it. And it seemed like for a long period of time this year, Harden bought in. I mean, he led the league in assists, to his credit. And he's a good playmaker. But the way Doc explained it, it sounded like at the end of the year that James wanted to revert back to, what he was. First of all, that's not helping the team. Secondly, you don't have that gear to be able to go to every night like you used to. You can pull it out every once in a while, like you did in a couple of those games against the Celtics. But if that's the way he's feeling and he brings up the whole basketball freedom after the season, am I bringing him back next year? Because he doesn't want to be in the role of distributor, it sounds like.
Here's what I would like to know, and we'll never know the answer to. Based on what Doc is saying, at what point did he notice that James decided, I'm going to go back to being a James Harden of old? And at that point, you can't really back in because it's too late at that point. Now, I said last week, and maybe it was earlier this week when we were talking about James Harden. You look at the James Harden that scored 42 and 45 points against Boston. He's the reason why they won those two games. Mm-hmm. They would have lost the series a lot earlier if it wasn't for James Harden. Yep. Scoring like James Harden of old. Yep. Why wasn't there a better medium in terms of him being a facilitator and more of a scorer? Because, Rob, I saw way too many times when we talked about this, James Harden would drive the paint and look lost. He was, instead of going to the rack with the theatrics and falling down trying to draw the foul or taking the soft floater in the paint, he's looking to pass the ball. Yep. I wonder how much James was torn within to try to be everything to everybody instead of being true to himself and not being considered a selfish player. I'm not sitting here defending James Harden, but you asked him to be a certain type of player, which he tried to do much of the season, and the stats show he did, but you took away an element of his game which hurts you more so than helped you, especially when your big man didn't show up night in and night out. So how much did James have that inner struggle of not being the James Harden he wanted to be, which cost this team more than it helped him?
Yeah, I don't know. It's hard to know unless you're behind the scenes, but Doc Rivers wouldn't bring something like that up if it wasn't an issue. So that's another thing, if you got to take into consideration if you're the Sixers here. The other part that he talked about that was really, really interesting to me was the whole culture thing. In other words, when Doc came in here, Elton Brand said to him, it sounds like Elton Brand said to him, look, there's still some people who are in like process mode here where winning isn't the ultimate priority. Right. And we need to weed some of those folks out. And Doc mentioned it was everybody from, equipment managers to people in the front office to blah, 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 blah.
Yep.
This is part of what happens. And again, I wasn't anti-process. I realized, so I'm not going to sit here and BS people, but that's something I think that needed to be taken into account when you do this. There becomes a losing culture, which isn't always, it's easy. It's harder to break. You know, it is, Derek. Like, it's harder to break lazy habits. I don't feel like getting up today. Yep. I don't feel like that. Yep. That's hard to break some of those habits. Absolutely. With yourself, with your kids, with, people around you, whatever. And it's also falls into the, hey, maybe I'll just sit this one out. I'm not feeling perfect tonight. And that's something else Doc talked about with Embiid, that he had to coax him. Hey, dude, we need you tonight. Like, let's go, man. Let's go, Joel. We need you to play tonight. That's something else that's a problem that has to be like fully extinguished if it isn't.
Yes. And that's why I said earlier, I don't know if, as much as I posed this question to you earlier, are the Sixers better with or without James Harden coming back? You gave your opinion. I gave my opinion. I think as I sit here right now, based on what Doc is saying, I don't know moving forward if the Harden-Embiid combination will work to get this team to where they want to go in the long haul, which is beyond the second round. I don't know. Based on what Doc said, I don't know if that's a possibility now, and which means you have to move on from Harden if that's the case. You're not moving on from Embiid.
No.
Let's face it, at least for one more year. You're not omitting Embiid from the equation. So what's the next step? You remove Harden from the equation. And if that is the case, again, based on your cap restraints, your inability to make significant trades and to take on gargantuan contracts, you're going to be a worse product than a better product. Plain and simple.
Here's the question I would ask. Are you, Derek, are in your estimation, are you willing to almost make this sort of a reset season? Like, in other words, all right, Houston's going to give Harden this, let him walk. We know we're only going to have $12 million to play with. Harris is rolling into last year. After this year, we get him off the books. Let's just see what Maxey is here as a feature guy with Joel. It's probably like the smart way to go, but I don't think they go that way simply because they went through so much with the process of losing, and I think they're in such go for it mode. I think it's a really fascinating thing to look at. I don't think they do it, but it's probably the best way for them to go.
To me, it's very similar to what the Eagles went through with Carson Wentz when they had that big cap number over their head. They had to just weather the storm for that 1 year with that big cap number, and then you come out blazing after that. And I'm looking at it now like the Sixers may just have to do that. They may have to weather the storm for 1 year with that cap number, the cap number hovering over their head, and then come out next year. And fans are just going to have to sit and begrudgingly just endure a season that could be an average season at best, knowing that hopefully this thing opens up to the point they can put a much better product together in 2024. But I also understand a lot of fans having a reservation because you just tortured them with this process for how many years? There's no guarantee that this particular brain trust can make that happen in 2024. Look at how many years of mediocrity the Denver fan base had to go through before they got it right. This team hasn't won a championship since what, 1983?
Yes.
Okay. So you've put this fan through a long, grueling, emotionally, shredding journey of trying to put a winning entity on the floor. Is one more year going to make that much of a difference considering what you put them through?
Here's the other thing you have to take into account with this. You could look at it two different ways with Joel Embiid. They probably don't want to waste another year of him. And also, where is he at with that kind of philosophy? In other words, does he want to go out there for another season knowing we're not going to ultimately be able to compete? Maybe the next year we will. This will be like 10 years for him. Does he want out at that point? It's tough. It's not easy. That question.
You may have to move Joel to make this after this coming season, 23-24. You may have to move him to make the team better. As strange as that sounds, he'll still be 31, approaching 32. Mm-hmm. Still got a lot of good years left in him. There's a team or some teams out there that will say, if we had a Joel Embiid, we would be a championship contender. Yeah. They might give up what you're looking for to make your team better, as well as making their team better. You may have to move him to get to where you want to go. And that's just the nature of the beast. Mm-hmm. It hasn't worked up to this point with him. We've seen him the last 3 years. There's been injuries that have held him back. It's a hand, it's a knee, it's a hamstring. It's something with him every year. And maybe you've gone as far as you can go with him. Maybe that's what it's come to, and you're forced now to move on from him. As much as you may not want to, you may have to. If things align the right way, draft picks, players, using him out there, dangling him out there as trade bait, you may have a situation that you just can't pass up because of an opportunity out there. So people should get ready for that as well.
Yeah, I'll give you a tweet that John Clark of NBC Sports Philadelphia put out about 2 minutes ago. He said an NBA league source tells him the desired outcome for the Sixers is still to do a deal with James Harden that makes sense in the short term and long term for both sides. He's coming back, man.
There you go.
He's coming back.
Yeah,
I've thought it all along. Derek, I never bought the Houston thing.
yeah.
I think it's leverage for him. People talk about Phoenix. I think that's leverage for him. I think Daryl Morey's going to feed right into it, and he's going to come back, and it's going to be 2 or 3 years.
I was going to say, do you think James Harden, if he could get the max somewhere else, would consider coming back here for just 2 years? If he can get a 4-year max somewhere else?
No, but I don't think he gets a 4-year max somewhere else. I don't think that's there.
Okay.
Look, to me, it's a no-brainer. If Houston is going to get close to max for 4 years, I'm saying, James, good luck. Take care. Bye. Thanks. See ya. I don't know. I don't know how much Daryl Morey's inability, he's got the blinders on for him, plays into it. I don't know. Interesting. All right, let's come back and do some NFL. There's an update on Stephon Diggs, which we'll give you. We'll tell you the latest stop for DeAndre Hopkins. Rams make a move in terms of the cap. We'll give you update on a couple running backs, quarterback competition, and we will get into our new QB wide receiver combos. We will rank them when we come back. Don't go anywhere. That's Derek. I'm Rob. We are Sports Take, JAKIB Sports YouTube Network. I want to tell you right now about Flynn Tree Services. Yes, Flynn Tree Services is an experienced, licensed, and insured Pennsylvania tree services company that will trim or remove any unwanted trees off of your property. They are experts at trimming all types of trees, and they serve southeastern Pennsylvania, South Jersey, and northern Delaware. Flynn Tree Services specializes in tree removal, stump grinding, as well as tree pruning. You go to their Facebook or Instagram page for more information or a sampling of their work. Give Flynn Tree Services a call at 610-850-2848, 610-850-2848, or online at flinntreeservices.com. That's flinntreeservices.com.